Right, let's move on to question number 4 now. And you can see here from the 2025 paper, we're dealing with topologies. Now, I didn't see anything like that in the 2024 paper, but this is something that's important, so you definitely want to take note of that. And one of the first things is just for us to understand what a network topology is. Now, there are two parts to a network topology. There's a physical part, in other words, the way the computers are actually set up in a computer lab or room. And there's the logical arrangement, which you see here. The logical arrangement defines how these machines are actually going to connect to maybe the central server or whatever it is, and how data is going to be communicated as well. So when they ask us for a definition, we're going to say the following. A network topology is what? It's a physical and logical arrangement of nodes and connections in a network. Right? Your nodes are basically your client machines. Now that we understand that, there are different types of topologies. So please, I have done a video on this, so please go and have a look at that. There's the star, ring, bus, and mesh topologies. And each one of them, when you understand it, you'll be able to answer the next question where it asks you for an advantage and a disadvantage. Now, an advantage here, just by looking at this, let's say this is our server. What's the advantage? If one goes down, the whole network doesn't go down. All my data is centrally controlled. What's a disadvantage? If anything happens to the central server, then it's going to affect everyone in the network. Okay. Moving on. When connecting to the internet, you have the option to select either copper, in other words, your normal network cable, your UTP and STP, or your fiber cable connection. Now, usually they would ask us, what's the benefit of fiber over copper? But look at this question. Give one reason why you should not consider a fiber connection. Now, if any of you remember my computer components video, you will have seen the difference between the fiber and the normal copper cable, right? Your STP and UTP, they are more durable. It's not going to break as easily, and it's much cheaper. So having said that, fiber is considerably more expensive. Yes, fiber gives you faster connection, but it is a more brittle cable. Why do we say that? Because we know there's a glass tube, data is transmitted via light. Okay. Then eavesdropping. Now, I'm not talking about the eavesdropping that you do when your friends are having a conversation and you overhear something, because that's basically what eavesdropping is. When we talk about eavesdropping in terms of our cables, think about that example I just gave you. It's indicating that one cable, that the data on there can actually be intercepted by another. Right? That's what our eavesdropping is. So when those signals are traveling along those cables and they are intercepted by some sort of outsider using whatever it is they are going to be using, that is eavesdropping. Right. Then we talk a little bit about satellite internet. Now, you know, with satellite internet, they will usually use this for sort of rural areas, places that are sort of out of town, especially if you're going camping and things like that, and you want to connect to the internet. How would you do that? Well, they ask us here to name 2 devices that you would need. So you've got satellite internet, and just think of Starlink, right? Or Elon Musk's one, Starlink. How do you connect to the internet? Well, you need a satellite dish, first of all. You need a dish. That dish must have some sort of router with it. So there's already my 2 devices. How do I connect to the internet? Well, that satellite dish looks for a signal from the orbiting satellite. Now, if there's anything in between, that can cause, delays in the signal, which is where we go to with our next question, where they spoke about latency. So latency is the delay in the signal. And you can imagine the distance between your satellite on the ground and the satellite in space. If there's any issues there, it can cause a delay in the signal. In other words, latency. Right, moving on. 4.4, I did mention this to you in our theory prep, downloading versus streaming. So please, downloading, remember, is when a user is taking any type of file and you are copying it from the internet. You are bringing it onto your device. That is downloading. Streaming is when you are receiving, or your device rather is receiving data constantly in real time. And we know examples are YouTube, Netflix, Showmax, any of those. 4.5, when surfing the web, the browser keeps track of your online activities. How can these web addresses remain undetected? Well, you can clear your browsing data. You can remove the list of sites that you've visited previously, and you can clear the history. We're not going to go into that topic, but you want to definitely clear that as well. Right, 4.6, social media allows users to share ideas and information by creating communities for interested users. Now, you see there, we're talking about social media. How do we create communities? Just think about that. Okay. Then they tell us, name 2 social media apps excluding X and Instagram. So are you going to mention X and Instagram? No. So which others are you going to mention? Well, any of the many others that are out there. Facebook, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, Telegram, TikTok, Twitch, any of these. Okay, any 2 over there. Then list 2 features found in a smart home. So we first need to understand, before we list these features, what is defined as a smart home? Like, how do we define a smart home? Well, that's where the technology is helping us do things within that home to make it easier. So you have control maybe over your lights. You've got control over the locks. Maybe the doors open automatically when guests arrive. You can link to your dishwasher, all these types of things. And you can set maybe times for these things to take place as well. That is all it all falls under the context of a smart home. So you can use any of those features. Biometrics comes into this as well. Right, so let's go to 2024 and look at question 4 over there. See what they had. Here they talk about spyware. What's spyware? Software that is monitoring what you are doing without you realizing it's there. That's why it's spy software. Okay. Then they want to know, how does that differ from phishing? Well, the main goal of phishing is to do what? Is to deceive victims into providing confidential information, right? And what are they going to do with that info? They're going to use that for fraudulent activities. Does that sound like spyware? No, it doesn't. So here you'd have to give a definition of spyware. So saying that it's, malicious software, it enters the user's computer without them knowing, and it sends this info to third parties. Then you'll have to give the difference here. So when we give the difference, we're going to give one sentence that is going to explain spyware. So we can just say spyware can track your user behavior and record your keystrokes without you knowing. The whole thing is without you knowing. And then I've given you the definition of phishing. Okay, here they say, when conducting online banking, the company accesses the online banking platform through a web page. Identify one method. One method that could be used by the online banking platform to reduce the risk of spyware when logging in. So can you see, if you don't understand what spyware is, you're going to have a problem answering this one over here. So how can they reduce the risk? Well, you can have a virtual keyboard. You can have that section where you enter your password, but like you only enter like the last 3 letters. You can have two-factor authentication and biometrics. Okay. Explain how the above mentioned method, do you see here? Once you've answered this, now they're saying, okay, so let's say you mentioned biometrics. Explain how the above identified method, biometrics, prevents the threat of spyware. Well, only you can log in there. It means like nobody else can do anything. Your personal biological data is going to be required to gain access. Right, 4.3, this was an interesting one. They gave the term and the description, and in some cases you needed to indicate the term, in others the description. So look at HTML. What is HTML? It's a language used to create a web page. Don't tell us hypertext markup language. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking for a description. Please check in that prep document that I've sent. for a lot of these words: description, explain, differentiate, things like that, so that you understand what they are asking of you. Then you have one here. The type of software application used to display a web page. Display a web page. That is going to be your browser. Don't put in Google Chrome. Please, you need to say browser. Then an address given to a computer by a network. Well, we already know that's an IP address. A text file sent by a web server to collect data about a user's browsing habits. There's your key. Collect data about a user's browsing habits. Those are cookies. And then your ISP, what is that? It is a company. What does that company do? It provides a connection to the internet. Okay, let's continue. Caching is one of the features that helps us to use the web more efficiently. So what is caching? Now, first of all, caching is memory. That's the first thing, right? Now, I know this is only one mark, but you need to get this. It is memory. What does this do? Well, it's memory that stores frequently used data, instructions, or web pages. Why would it want to do that? So that it can display more quickly when it's opened again. So think of your favorite website. You go to your website, look through it, close everything down, and when you open it again, because this memory has stored that frequently used data, it's stored that web page or part of that web page. When you want to open it again, it opens up quicker. Okay, so please remember that. Then give two main reasons for using web cache. Right? So we've just explained this now. So why would we use this? Well, first of all, it's going to reduce the amount of bandwidth we use because it's now going to open that site from what's in the memory and then carry on with the internet. So it's going to use less bandwidth. And then, as was stated here, when you explained it, it allows previously visited pages to load quicker. Okay. You will see that there's a bit of repeating going on here. Don't be scared about that because if that's one of the reasons, then that's a reason. 4.5, here we go, video conferencing. This is something I've spoken to people about before and told them these are things that do come in, usually a scenario. So here you've got your scenario. The company uses video conferencing to communicate with each other over a network. One of the staff members consistently encounters poor video quality during conferencing sessions, characterized by frequent disruptions in the video feed. So the picture keeps breaking up. Can you give two solutions? Well, I think we all know, number one, when we have that happening, it's usually because something's buffering. Yes. So you want to get a faster connection. You want to maybe switch to fiber if the person doesn't have fiber. Maybe they want to go to a faster wireless connectivity method. We're just assuming now, but the main thing is to get a faster connection. Maybe you want to connect when there's less internet traffic. So maybe you're connecting at a time when there's a lot of internet traffic. You need to make sure there's nothing running in the background that's maybe using the internet, and you don't want to overload the internet with other tasks. So those are, you can use any of those to give that answer. And then the last one, in question 4, the company is interested in implementing grid computing. So there you can already see what they're going to ask you. However, some employees are unfamiliar with this concept. So explain to them what grid computing is. Well, what is it? It's when we use multiple computers, and that can be, servers or normal computers. It's generally our servers, but you're using multiple computers or servers for what purpose? So that's your first mark. You are making use of multiple computers/servers for what purpose? To solve problems by pooling all of those resources together. So I'm going to say it again. It is the use of multiple computers or servers to solve problems as if it was one computer or through pooling the resources. While we are here, let's go on to question number 5. Let's open question 5 on this side as well. And you see we're dealing with information management. So let's see what they say. And here you can see the scenarios coming through. In this one, they say during the Rugby World Cup in 2023, the coaches, referees were very concerned regarding the impact of the game on the players. One such concern was the amount of head injuries. Well, yeah, I should think as much. World Rugby has been at the forefront of using new technology to manage head injuries as part of its ongoing 6-point plan to become the most progressive sport in the world on player welfare. To this end, World Rugby is implementing smart mouth guards. Okay, so there we've got our whole thing. The smart mouth guard. So remember, when we spoke about the smart home, we spoke about the fact that we can connect to different devices, we are able to draw data, we are able to switch things on remotely, etc. So if we're talking about a smart mouth guard, as you can see here, it means this is a mouth guard through which we can get data. Okay, they say it's equipped with in-game alerts designed to detect high acceleration events that may lead to a collision. As the smart mouth guards are a recent addition, many clubs need to do some research. Give 2 tips on how to check that information sourced from the internet is in fact correct and reliable. Well, we can see just on the surface if there's any spelling and grammar mistakes. We can see if what the references are on the website. We can check the info that we find against other information and how often that info was used. Then we need to know the difference between copyright and plagiarism. Now, we know plagiarism, unfortunately, a lot of you do. It's passing off someone else's work as your own. You know that copy-paste when you take it from the internet? Yes, that one? No. Okay, don't do that. You're going to go to university and get 0. Then copyright. So if that's plagiarism, what is copyright? It's a legal restriction on copying and distribution of intellectual material. Somebody else has created something, whether that's a movie, whether that's music, whatever it is, but there's a legal restriction on copying and distribution of that. That is copyright. Then explain the process of how data is collected using the smart mouth guard by answering the following questions. So all of these are based on this question over here. During gameplay, what type of data will the smart mouth guard receive from the players? What did we say? It's going to get what? The impact on the head, right? Because they want to monitor what's going on there. So you can say the impact on the head. You can say the force with which the player is biting down on the mouth guard. That as well. So anything along those lines. Explain how the input given in 5.3.1 will be processed. So it's monitoring that. How is it now going to be processed? Well, they can capture their data related to a player's movements. The data received from the mouth guard can be processed to determine, the seriousness of the impact. So that's what can happen. And then they say, give an example of the output that will be produced from the discussion. So you've monitored it. You've gathered the data. What are you going to do with it? Well, you can actually see if the players had too many knocks, do they need to be rested for the next few games? I think the last one for question 5. The coaches aim to monitor the performance stats of every player during games. To accomplish this, spreadsheets are frequently used for data analysis. One way to present this info is through a graphical representation, in other words, a graph or a chart. State 3 ways in which a chart or graph can be made easier to interpret. Well, guys, this is very simple. We can add a chart title, a legend. We can add series labels, axes, grid lines, data labels, colors, any of those things to make it, because all they're saying is to make it easier to interpret. They're not asking you whether you're going to use a different type of chart, but how are you going to make it easier for someone to actually read and understand? That's the whole thing there. Right, and then this one goes on to question 6. Let's go to the other one, question 5. And let's see what they have to say. Also information management. So they give us another scenario. I'm not going to go through all of these scenarios. I've included the papers in the description as well, so you can go through that. Yeah, they ask us, and did you see how the questions were asked and what they were looking at? They were looking at how you actually get that information. How do you get the data? How do you turn it into information? How are you going to be gathering that? Why are you gathering that? Those are the type of questions that come up here. Give 3 important questions that the nurse could ask to determine Michael's symptoms and reasons for feeling weak. So again, you'll have to read through that. And again, look at this 3 important questions. Okay, so it's related to the scenario. You'll have to read through that. I don't want to keep you here all day as well. 5.1.2, each parent had to complete an online camp form with important information. Identify 4 essential fields on the camp form that you would need in a medical emergency. Now, Each one, I mean, I can give you answers. I can say, the parent's contact number, parent's name, medical condition, all of that. But anything that's relevant to what they say in here. 4 essential fields that you would need in a medical emergency. So think about this. Something happens to you on camp. What do? What info would they need here in order to get you sorted out? Would they need a parent or guardian's contact number? Yes. The name of that individual? Yes. Any medical conditions you have? Yes. And what about your medical aid name? Right? All of those things. So they continue. They have another one as well. Here is a typical question that comes up. Please go and read through this. I've specifically done a video on this, the input, processing, and output. So they give you a scenario. They tell you here, using the headings presented below, indicate how the app will monitor Michael's insulin levels. So they are telling us here that his levels are controlled and monitored by the sensor attached to his arm. Okay, the sensor converts small amounts of glucose from the interstitial fluid under the skin into an electronic signal. Never heard of this. Anyway, the Minimap app then allows him to view his insulin levels. So based on that, we've got input, process, and output. Remember our information processing cycle? Yes. So with input, what's going to happen? Information is gathered from the sensor. Right? The sensor is getting that information about the glucose levels. You can say also the amount of insulin released by the insulin pump. Then with the processing, what's going to happen? Well, if the insulin level is too low, because now it got the input, right? It gave that. If the insulin level is too low, then the sensor must release more insulin. And then the output is when the correct level of insulin is maintained. And again, this is why I keep showing you this. There's an app. So the app is getting input from the sensor. It then adjusts and says, right, he needs glucose, pushes glucose in, insulin in, and then the output here is the result of that processing. Okay, then they mention here, what advantage does this feature offer when Michael needs to maintain a record of data received from the app? What does that mean? That indicates sharing. So in other words, you can take the data and share it with other platforms. Right, so question number 6, we then move on to social implications. And this will be the second last question for section B. Okay, I think it goes up to about question 7 or 8, and then it moves on to the others. Right, so social implication. Here again, we've got a scenario. American healthcare company Henry Schein has reported a second cyber attack this month by the Black Cats, the ransomware gang. So look at this. What is a cyber attack? What is ransomware? Remember, this is software that holds our data for ransom. Okay, and look there. Already the first question is that. So what is it? Remember, this is 3 marks now. So how are we going to define this? First of all, ransomware is a type of malware. So you need to put that in for 1 mark. It's malware. What does it do? It prevents or limits the user from accessing their computer until they've paid a ransom through an online payment system. And it's usually some sort of cryptocurrency. Okay, that's how you end up getting your 3 marks. Then the difference between the dark web and the deep web. So the dark web is simply a part of the internet only accessible by means of special software. And an example of that would be like a government website. The deep web is a part of the internet that is not discoverable by standard search engines. So for example, going into your emails, your chat messages, cloud storage, that would be examples of the deep web. Okay, next one. Companies try their best to protect information from hackers. So how are we going to do that? Can you give 2 ways of us doing that? Use that one term you all know that comes up, which is the firewall. You can use a firewall to prevent unauthorized access. You can install an antivirus system. You can install anti-malware. You can inform network users about the risks associated with social engineering, and you can make sure passwords are changed frequently. You can also restrict what a user can do when they are on the network. So anything like that. Here's another one. Various online platforms are available for making and sharing recordings. Name one output device and one input device to produce a video recording. I mean, output, it's your monitor, your speaker, your smartphone. Input, your microphone, touchscreen, anything like that. Okay, internet attacks target the infrastructure of the web. Identify two types of internet attacks and explain them. Now, we have things like, I don't like talking about this, which is cyber terrorism. Okay, we've heard that term out there in the world. Cyber terrorism, usually it attacks a country's IT infrastructure. For what purpose? To disrupt communication. So you're first going to put cyber terrorism here, and then for one mark. And guys, it's one mark, so just one sentence. Okay, you can have things like spoofing attacks, where the attacker provides false data to the network. You can have denial of service attacks, where your servers are just flooded with requests until it becomes overwhelmed, and then users can't connect to the network. And finish up social implications. So again, here we go. Discuss one example in your school where using computers could accomplish these things. Saving paper, saving communication costs. I mean, they can use email. They can do things digitally instead of just printing everything out. They can type letters faster than writing it. The calculation of marks can be done in Excel, any of that. Do you see social engineering come up again? So I'm not going to worry with that, but I just want to look at reverse social engineering. I mentioned here 6.2.2. An aspect of social engineering is reverse social engineering. Discuss two examples of scenarios where reverse social engineering could occur. So, for example, a phone call from someone claiming to be a vendor, a supplier, something like that, persuading an employee to disclose account details. Here's another one. An attacker posing as a job applicant gains access to confidential information during an interview. Another one, an attacker posing as a legitimate employee sabotages a company's internal network or systems. But I want us just to understand the following. What exactly is reverse social engineering? Even though I've given you those examples, it's basically a manipulation technique, okay, where this attacker or whoever the individual is trying to deceive a victim into initiating contact and willingly providing sensitive info or access. That's why I use the example of a job applicant. So they pose as a job applicant and they are deceiving this individual into initiating contact and providing them with the sensitive information instead of them trying to steal it. Companies are dependent on computers, and if they experience any hardware or internet connection failure, it might have some devastating effects. And this is all under hardware failure. What is hardware failure? When your computer components don't want to work. All right. So something's gone wrong with the motherboard, the RAM, your network cable is broken, any type of things like that. So what are two of the most common problems when it comes to hardware failure? Well, it could be power related problems. Think of what Eskom has done to all our hardware. That, the power going off, power coming back on this, it causes power surges, it damages components. Poor maintenance, overheating, and general poor care of the device. Just look at some of your phones. Okay. Right. 6.4. Technology also plays a huge role in society. Give two advantages and two disadvantages of using technology in society. And you can have any listed there. Okay, then you see the firewall. Okay, so this was an interesting one because they gave you a definition here and you had to use these particular words or terms and slot them into where they needed to be. So it says, and let's just fill it in as we go along. A firewall can be what or hardware based? It can be software or hardware based. It monitors traffic between the computer and the network. The user sets criteria for the traffic. The firewall will do what? It will accept or reject the traffic based on this. It can help prevent hacking and malicious software that could be a threat to the security of the data. Okay, beautiful. Last question. Let me see, this is 7, and then that's section C. Yeah. So let's have a look at this. Question 7, solution development. Now, we'll probably go through this quite quickly because a lot of this has to do with your prac work. Explain 2 ways. Okay, let's jump back. One of your teachers received a file in an email. He cannot open the file that he received as an attachment. Explain 2 ways in which he can do this. Well, you can save it as an earlier version, open it on a different PC, download and install a patch, maybe try opening it with another program. The same teacher discovered that the word processing program has a feature that automatically allows you to add captions to pictures, graphs, or tables. Give 2 reasons other than saving time why it is better to use this feature than to do it manually. Well, captions are always consistently positioned. Your captions will then update. If you make any changes, it will show in a table of figures. They are automatically numbered. There's just so many reasons. Okay, can you see it's prac work? How does a function in a spreadsheet differ from a formula? So a function is actually built into the application, whereas a formula is just a calculation using a combination of cell references. So the function is built in, and the formula is a calculation using a combination of cell references. Then to finish off here, some of the teachers are inputting their marks as percentages into a database. It is noticed that when they enter their marks, that some marks are higher than 100. Explain our validation rule. So this is access. Our validation rule can assist teachers in entering the marks correctly. Well, you could put a validation rule in to say that they must only enter marks less than or equal to 100. Right? So you're putting in that rule that restricts them from entering values of more than 100. Then you'd have to give the actual validation rule. So you could say greater than or equal to 0 and less than and equal to 100, or you can say between 0 and 100, like literally using the word and. Right, then let's go to 2025. Let's finish this off now. Question 7. And you can see there immediately we see our picture. They say below is an extract from the spreadsheet. What does the exclamation mark in the formula indicate? That is indicating that it's in a different worksheet. It's going to cell D1 in the worksheet Feb. That's one other than the one you are currently in. Below is an extract from Michael's insulin levels. Remember that whole scenario, and gathered statistics. Okay. And then they want us to answer some questions on that. So you've got to actually read this and then answer those questions. Here we have from database, and they ask us here which field indicates that a Boolean data type was used. So when we look at this, we first need to ask, like, what is a Boolean data type? And this is a data type that represents one of 2 values, so like true or false or yes and no. Do we have yes and no for a surname, full name, age, camper ID, parent cell number, medical histories, or allergies? Do you have allergies? Yes or no? If the nurse changes the field size of the age field to 2, do you think this is correct? Yes, because most people are not going to be on a camp if they are 100. Right? So 2 should be fine. Identify the data type, that should be used for medical history. That should be what? Short text or long text? Long text. Okay? That means it can be more than 255 characters. Next one. Identify the database object that would enable the nurse to only gather the names and medical history of all the campers. Well, you'll have to pull a query. Next one, the nurse wants to add another heading. Now, how do we add another heading? That's going to be adding a label. Okay, you see this is all access. Here we go. As we finish up, examine the following screenshot of data in a spreadsheet. What are they asking us? Michael keeps track of his food intake. We're busy with Michael again. The values within the cell range A2 to A5, here we go, that section there, are displayed inaccurately. What actions are necessary to ensure that the data is displayed correctly? Well, look at the rest. They displayed as dates. So we need to format that to display as a date. change the formatting. Go to Format Cells, choose Date. Then 7.3.2, name the formatting feature Michael used in this E2 to E10 range. You can see that is conditional formatting. And then 7.3.3, provide the function Michael should use to determine the total quantity of carbohydrates he consumed on the 16th of January. The minute we're talking about our total, we're talking about sum. Right. So grade 12s, that brings us to the end of section B. And in our next video, we'll finish up with section C from the 2024 final paper of last year and the supplementary of this year.